This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Cathe Dykstra. She is the president and CEO of Family Scholar House, where she leads one of the country's most comprehensive models linking affordable housing, education, and long-term economic mobility. Under Cathe's leadership, Family Scholar House has grown to serve over 106,000 households across 48 states. Cathe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm delighted to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and you fit a very niche audience of what you're serving in these households. And I want to get into what Family Scholar House is doing. But first, I like to open these conversations on the podcast, really getting to know the person as well, not just the program and the results and the performance. I find so often the backstory of who you are and how you got here to be so valuable for context. So, would you care to share a few of moments of your backstory and maybe what brought you to the position where you are?
So, a long time ago, I taught my daughter not to think of me as what I did. Like, not you are a doctor, but you are, you do that work. And I did that because I knew my career would change a lot based on my interests through time, and I never wanted her to feel like she'd lost who I was. And
Mhm.
so I've had one of those really nice crooked paths that get you from an education at Wake Forest, focused on economics, all the way to working in a domestic violence shelter, promoting home ownership and economic mobility for survivors, to being able to take on a very small nonprofit and then guide it to self sufficiency, have it be sustainable and scalable across the country. And that is really something that I enjoy. I think of myself more as a builder. I've often told my board that when we get to the point where what we need is somebody to monitor the thermostat, I'll help them find that person, but it isn't me. Um, and so, all of that to say, pretty much throughout my career, I've said yes and then try to figure it out, as opposed to saying no and then wishing I'd said yes. And that has ended up very well for me.
That's a real skill set that people can pioneer something and not just maintain it. Is there something specific that you could reveal what it's like to have a comfort operating in that space? That's not a given that people are comfortable being a pioneer.
Yeah, I often tell our board leaders that you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And and that's not good for everybody. There are people that are just like, "Woo, this is just way too much for me." But if you know that you're uncomfortable and likely everybody else in the situation that would be asked that question or asked to do something would also be uncomfortable, then there's a solidarity in that. And then you say, okay, well, if everybody is equally uncomfortable about this, what could I do that would advance it, even if that's just an inch? How do I get this an inch closer to the goal line? Um, Everybody's not a quarterback. Everybody's not the offensive lineman. You need both. And so who can get the challenges out of the way so that the person calling the play or running the play can score?
I love that analogy. We're talking about your leadership, which naturally segues into Family Scholar House. Share for our listeners who are not familiar with what you do and where you are. Why don't you start us there?
So the whole focus of Family Scholar House is to help families attain full self-sufficiency, independence from government subsidy programs by getting the education that they need for the career of their choice and then entering that. But we recognize that it isn't just about serving an adult. It's about serving that adult and their whole family. Because as one of the mothers said to me very early on, don't fool yourself, Miss Cathe. If you're not helping me with my children, you're not breaking the cycle of anything. There's wisdom in that. It's a comprehensive program that looks at how do we get our kids on the right path for a strong education, and how do we take particularly single parents and vulnerable young adults who've come out of foster care and help them enter the post-secondary space. And when I say college, I'm talking about everything from apprenticeships and credentialing programs all the way through. Anything that is post-secondary. How do we make it okay for them to choose a path and maybe change their mind, but choose a path of their own and then empower them along the way. And that's resulted in just here in Louisville, even though we serve 48 states, Louisville is where most of our residential programming is right now. 949 college degrees earned by folks that never thought they would even go to college. I think about one young woman who came to us hoping she would get a med tech degree, and she's now an OBGYN in our own community. And it was getting her in for a credentialing program and then say, look, you're so good at that. And then a 2-year, and then a 4-year, and then medical school, and then a specialized program after that in residency. And all that was a step at a time, not one big goal at the end, but what is the next thing? Helping people see that can often be the difference between whether they feel competent to do it, and then knowing that they have your support to help them makes everything a whole lot easier.
You're delivering a program that for many industries, there's this tension that where they say, "Hey, we're just about property management. We just build the apartments. We just make sure that trash is picked up and the lawn care is taken care of." And yet, in reality, there's so much that's going on inside the unit that impacts the property, that impacts the community, and not a lot of people want to take the risk to dabble in that social space where you're operating. And so, but yet here you're telling us that you guys have taken the risk and you are developing programs with results. So speak to how leadership has had to develop this program. Like, how did you guys get started?
Well, let me say a couple of things about what you just said first, and one of them's going to be controversial. So I'll just preface that. The first thing is that some of those property owners that you just talked about, those property management companies and owners, actually contract with us to provide the resident services for the people that they care for because they know the outcomes are so much better when they have wraparound services. Now, here is what I believe, and I'm speaking on behalf of me and our organization. We have an affordable housing crisis across the country, but it isn't just about building more affordable housing. It's about using the affordable housing that we have more wisely. Affordable housing should be a pathway out of poverty, not a lifetime in it. It sh it should be a way for people to have economic mobility, not be kept in that housing for forever because they don't have any other opportunities. If you see it that way, then the services become a natural extension of the philosophy that affordable housing is an important step for building not just an individual and a family and a community, but building up our nation, providing employees for employers that want to hire quality candidates. And we've really lived in that space. And we are a national best practice. We are award winning across the nation. And we didn't think in the beginning, we didn't think anything we were doing was just all that special. We thought it was something everybody should be focused on. How do you help the people that live with you, that you care for, have a better life? And so we have to hire a unique blend of person to hit that leadership level because it isn't the traditional model. We spend a lot of time educating partners about how we're different and about the requirements of our program. And that has really been well embraced.
You mentioned economic mobility, and you mentioned a crucial piece here about how people can have a pathway out of poverty. And that is a link that sometimes gets to be, like you mentioned, very controversial. But I've been thinking, and I may put some writing around this because everybody assumes that you can bootstrap your way out of poverty. Why can't you just do better? Why can't you just go into a medical school? Why can't you just, go out and get a degree, get a better job, et cetera, et cetera? And so let's break down some of that myth of why you can't just bootstrap your way out.
So 73% of our residential participants are the first in their families to go to college. 40%, 40% are the first in their families to graduate from high school. You imagine that that's your reality. Nobody's ever talked to you about college. Nobody in your family ever went to college. People in your family have bought into a lot of myths about college. It's completely unaffordable. It's not necessary. You should just find a job and stick with it. And the job that you are in doesn't provide enough income for basic living expenses and childcare. So I was asked one time, "Gosh, why don't your folks just work?" And I said back to this leader, I used one of his own analogies back on him. He was always talking about digging holes. I don't know why. It was his thing. And I said, "Well, if you woke up in the morning and you found yourself in a hole and you dug all day to make little footholds on the wall to get out, and at the end of the day, the hole was was deeper, how many days would you do that?" And he said, "Well, I'd stop. That's stupid." I said, "That's the situation my participants are in. No matter what they do, they can't make enough to survive. And so if they have to pay for childcare and transportation, and that affects their rent, their rent's higher because they're making money, then their hole is deeper every day. The only way that changes is if the landscape changes, is if you say, these programs, and this is the way we see it, these programs are for a timeout, are for a space in life where you can get all of the resources together so that you can do things that will ultimately lead you to self sufficiency. And that is getting an education, whether that's a credentialing program or all the way through a 4 year degree or even, an advanced degree. 62% of our folks go into healthcare. I don't think there's anybody that disagrees about the need for healthcare workers across the nation. It's a huge shortage. We need those folks. But how do we expect them to be able to do it all if they can't even afford to go get the credentialing they need to do it? So this is, really looking at the systemic problems and addressing those at the root cause.
Mhm. You mentioned the example of a person you mentioned the example of a person who was gonna start out in a med tech role and then went on to be an OBGYN and a doctor, and we think a lot in metrics of those types of, aspirations and degrees, but I'm sure you have more examples. Would you like to share another, example or 2 about how somebody moved out of that path of poverty?
I have so many stories, and they're so amazing. The thing is, I'll tell a story, and somebody will say, "That's so extraordinary," and I'm like, "No, she is exemplary, yes, but she is representative of all of the participants that we have because everybody's story is special." I think about one young woman who very early when I got to our organization, they were tiny. They were serving 4 people. I'd never worked anywhere where you had 4 staff members and 4 people that you were serving. It's a one-to-one ratio. Nobody can sustain that. So a lot of things needed to change. And just as I was thinking about whether or not this was really a good fit for me, a young woman walked in. She was 18 years old and she had a 4-year-old son. That means she had a baby at 14. And she looked at me and Katie, I could see it in her eyes. She actually believed I could help her. And I wasn't sure I could help her, but she believed I could. Good student, had graduated from high school, very, very shy, had been in foster care. And the father of her baby was 20 years older than she was. And there was a relationship between the father of her baby and her foster parents. And so There was a lot of stuff going on that could not possibly be blamed on her. Her son was born, and they decided we'll raise him like her brother and have them both in foster care until she turned 18 and decided to age out of the system. And all of a sudden, she's a mom. She's a mom. She's a high school graduate. She's terribly shy and afraid. She doesn't know what to do, and she has no place to live. And I think about her a lot because when she came to us, I was then immediately responsible for her and her son. And I understood that I was, and I wasn't afraid to be. I was afraid to fail them. I wasn't afraid to be responsible. I was afraid to fail them, which I worked really hard with my staff to make sure we were doing everything that we could. She is now, first she got a bachelor's in psychology. She is now a nurse and a homeowner, and he is a college graduate. And all of that came about because after not having a true family for most of her life, she found a family in us that would offer, and this is so important, unconditional love and accountability in equal measure. In measure. We held her accountable, but at the same time, we supported her in achieving the goals that she had set and the expectations that we had. For instance, all of our folks have to be full time in their post secondary program. I don't have a donor that wants to help somebody take one class a year. They need to be actually focused on that. And so that can be hard, but that means we provide the academic coaches, success coaches, family advocates, mentors, tutors, all of the support people to make sure that there are no gaps in service and that people are comfortable asking for help. And I think we can both admit that asking for help can be really hard. And if you can get them to the point where they are okay with asking you for help, then you know what the need is and you can help them figure out how to meet it.
What an amazing example of really moving people forward, bettering the community, and, it's just such a success story, and I know you have that multiplied times so many other numbers. You mentioned donor. I'm sure this program is not happening, without partnerships. Can you explain a few of those dynamics?
So we've had all kinds of partnerships through the years, and my approach to that is like a Venn diagram. I think about the people that are the most natural partners, like we do the same sort of work. So all of the shelter system, um, uh, churches, colleges obviously benefit when their students that normally would stop out and drop out aren't stopping out and dropping out. They're getting all the way to the finish line. Um, those sort of partners. But then I also think about the most unusual partners. Who is it that you would partner with that just feels like, what is the overlap? And it might be as thin as a hair. For instance, we work with employers, we work with other property owners, which you would think would be our competitors, and they're not. We work with Medicaid companies. So we're helping people come off of Medicaid, even as we're helping other people go on to Medicaid, creating a continuum and a path. And so when you look at it that way, there really isn't anybody we can't or don't partner with on some level in some area for some need.
Mhm. There is an economic cost of trauma, and a lot of people try to put numbers to that, how much it costs society. But we also don't want to we wanna do it because we should do it, not because it costs society, quite frankly. We should do it because it's the right thing to do. But can you speak to some of that economic cost of trauma, and what does that mean, and how are you then, explaining that to some of your partners that you just mentioned?
So we struggled so much to explain it, we wrote a white paper and put it on our website so that we could connect people to that information because some people want, a thimble's full, and some people want to understand where all the research came from. There is an economic cost. That cost is borne by all of us across society, and it's generational. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about that PTSD can be inherited. You don't have to have experienced it to have experienced the PTSD of a parent, for instance. And in living in their world with their PTSD, it can affect a child. So we did a couple of things. One is we did the research. We started talking to folks. We got great, absolutely great response from our Kentucky legislators saying, "Okay, now I get it." Like, now I get it. Because before that, good heart, want to help people, but want to help people to a certain point. And now they understand, okay, the reason you do opioid abatement work, the reason that you focus on mental health, the reason that you do all these things, addressing all of the trauma and helping people develop coping skills is because it's the right thing to do. And there's a benefit to society from doing it. And that led, in part, to the development of our database. We built our own database. I tell you what, we looked everywhere for something that would meet our needs, and we had spreadsheets of where our spreadsheets were. And you get so big that the spreadsheets are just not cutting it. So we built our own database with the help of the Humana Foundation. They funded the initial build. And it tracks 250 fields of information for every household we serve, including their trauma, particularly for those that have experienced what we call complex trauma, so polyvictimization. They've had a lot of different traumas, and in trauma, 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. The more times you've been victimized, the more you see the world as a victim. And we want to switch that to seeing the world as a survivor. So we've done that work, and that database now has 122,000 households in it. Of that, 86,531 are Kentucky households, and our Kentucky legislators come to us for data. Now they're not getting names, but they are getting an indication of what works and what is most cost effective, even in helping families overcome this. Um, and that has just been such rewarding work because we don't just use it with external partners. When you have a young woman or a young man that they're saying, I just have so far to go and it just feels like I can't do it, and you can help them look back on how far they've come, they can find a renewed strength in pursuing their goals. Uh, and we use the Arizona Self Sufficiency Matrix, so it's a very objective scoring method. But one of the really cool things with an external partner that came about is one of my dear friends, Senator Julie Rocky Adams. She's a state senator here. Developed a legislation around strangulation, and she had a lot of peers saying, "Oh, just don't talk about that." Strangulation is an awful thing. Uh, but what we were able to do, and in part with the work with trauma, is helping people understand that strangulation isn't just a crime; it's a traumatic brain injury. Strangulation, you may learn differently, which you may qualify for support from your college or university that you did not realize you qualified for or that was available. Your brain is different. That releases a victim from the feeling that they're responsible for why they can't learn the same way they used to. And to be able to do that together with community leaders and bring forth legislation that matters and help people feel good about what they've overcome and the path they're on, that's just the best work ever. That we combine housing with that. I mean, I don't lose the sight of that because if you don't have housing, doing all this other stuff is super hard, right? You just can't do it.
We have so much to learn in this space as it relates to people, how we learn, how we move forward, how we improve lives of ourselves. And, this tension of, are we providing housing with just what we see on the outside, or are we doing more based upon what's going in the unit? I think that's what's so crucial about having you here to talk about how we can develop strategies, how we can develop programs to really move people forward at the same time while having that stable housing moment.
Right. And, I think that often when people hear our story, they think, oh, I need to start all these programs. I'm not saying that. You may have community partners already in your community that can help you with some of these things. Partner with them. We work in other states. What I will work for other property owners. Look for people who could provide some of this. I'm not asking property managers to all of a sudden become social workers, but leverage social workers that are part of your ecosphere to support your residents in ways that benefit everybody.
Hmm. So, two titles that I saw that you were called a Chief Possibility Officer and Female Disruptor. You've actually been titled those. Uh, what do those titles mean to you?
Well, first, the chief possibility officer actually came about from my board quite a few years ago, and it comes from saying yes and then figuring it out. Like, because I would always say, What are the possibilities? Let's look at the possibilities." And I knew they really got what I did when they named me that and then described somebody else in the community as the chief impossibility officer because he said no to everything. And I thought, okay, well, they get what I do. Um, as a disruptor, I think what I like about that is that it says I'm not content with status quo. I'm not content to say, well, we help those young women, we help those families. That's good enough. It's never good enough. We have to be doing more. And that isn't just about us doing it. We have an affiliate program that helps other nonprofits replicate our work because I don't want to do it in Seattle, Washington. I want folks in Seattle, Washington to care about their community enough to want to replicate the program. So when you look at it, how do we disrupt the way things are done now in meaningful ways that create a new norm for how things are done, and then we're going to disrupt that one too.
Hmm. I really, really appreciate this because I've talked openly about some of my own housing instability, being homeless and living in a tent, living in subsidized housing, living in crappy housing. And there's pieces of this, though, that don't have to be overcomplicated, but it does take a person like you to be willing to be the disruptor and to explore the possibilities and navigate the risk. I'm really hoping that somebody is listening to our conversation and it just hits a certain part that they are willing to then take a leap and be a self-appointed disruptor in this space. So I really appreciate you sharing. Before we close out, Kathy, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation? Something maybe we missed or something you want to circle back to?
One thing I do want to point out is we created our own parent company in 2022, really the very end of 2022, because there are so many other programs that are tangential to Family Scholar House. So, Family is the parent company. And I would encourage people to get on familybrands.family or familyscholarhouse.org to learn more about what we do to see if there is a way for us to help them leverage, you know, uh, resources in their own community to do similar work. We let other nonprofits use our database, compartmentalize their information off, that they then have the kind of data that helps them write really good grants to get support that they might not be eligible for if they didn't have the data. I love a story, but I want it backed up by data. I love data, but I want it backed up by a story. So the combination of those things, we want to help other nonprofits, not just help people, yes, but also help other nonprofits help the people in their communities.
Mhm. I can even envision you helping developers who are developing affordable housing and who want to put together a package to talk about holistic housing as well. So, yeah, you've got nonprofits, you've got developers, you have housing authorities. There's a lot of people in this space that can learn from what you guys have accomplished.
I think there's a real lesson in here for HUD as well. Because if you look at how our use of vouchers uh, lead to a family never needing a voucher again, that is something that seems to be missing on a larger scale. How to use a voucher so that it never isn't needed by that family again.
It'd be great to see the self-sufficiency piece that's already existing in the program, but to really, really be funded at such a level that decision makers could come out and utilize platforms to say, all right, let's go. We want, whatever percentage of participation. We want 50% participation. We want 3-year goals, 5-year goals. But it's done in a balanced approach, not an arbitrary approach. It's done with the data. It's done understanding that people need to have space to achieve some of those metrics.
Because we all make mistakes.
Mhm.
Making a mistake shouldn't end the opportunity. It should be a way for you to reset and go, I keep pushing for a HUD demonstration project to show across the country with us and our nonprofit affiliates the difference that is possible. Look at housing and support services together.
Mhm. Yeah. I like the fact that it can be not forced self-sufficiency or not forced bootstrapping, but it can be collaborative responsiveness. And that's what you and your team are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I love your enthusiasm for our work.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. Once again, we have Cathe Dykstra, the president and CEO of the Family Scholar House, with us on the ChangeMakers podcast. Cathe, thank you for your time, and Godspeed to you and your team as you guys keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.